Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Gabriel Brent, and this is the Appa Swing Pub. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so first off, let's start off with our Forex markets. And really, over today, what we're going to be doing is pretty much just looking at all the different foreign exchange markets, a few indexes, some ETFs, just to give us an overall idea of what's going on in our markets and where do we see things going and what we look to have happen. Uh, Not only what has happened in the past week, but also what will be happening in the next week. So let's go ahead and get started here. On the Aussie yen, looks like we've been in a downtrend. We've had a little retracement to the upside. You can see here in the weekly zone that we've found some uh, supply up here in this blue level, this blue zone. And if we come down to our daily chart, we grab context from our daily chart. So that's what I'm looking to do on this particular chart here is to look for that confluence, okay? So we can see that we've bounced off of this brown zone here. Let's just turn on the most current zones, and I'm going to assume that everybody here in the audience today has experience with the AppaZone software. If you don't, please feel free to check out our website and browse around there. We have 3 different packages, the elements, generations, and methods. Uh, Mostly we'll be talking about the elements package. I might throw in the methods uh, confirmation signals here as we get into the entry time frame, but we want to make sure that everybody can follow along with a very basic knowledge of these zones and zone theory. So looking at the Aussie yen here, looks like we've come down and we find ourselves in a range on the daily. All right. In this range here, we know that we're retesting really good weekly supply, but on the daily, it looks like we've found ourselves a range in between these two daily levels. All right. So I'm thinking range here, and on the long term, I would like to see price continue this weekly trend to the downside. But on the daily, it looks like a good size range, and we could possibly break through this daily zone as it's been hit multiple times now, and the color of the zone says that it could be getting weak. So granted, the zone below here could also be getting weak as well. So I think it's important that we play this level as a range. So um, just go ahead and say range on this one. Now, technically, I would say that overall, this would be from the upside here, from the top brown zone, this would be a TF for a weekly perspective. To the downside. But our trending and our trender and things that we see here really starting to point more towards the upside as far as the context, but it's really hard to tell. So I think I'm just going to leave TF weekly to the downside if we're up in this area here, and we will see how this market plays out. So again, if you're playing range, you want to play the extremes of the range, which is exactly where the zone is. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to our other market here, or another market, I shouldn't say the other one. We're going to be looking at several. Okay. All right. So on the Aussie dollar, we have seen that nice retest of the weekly level, and we've come back down here to retest the lows. So that is very interesting on the weekly. So it looks like the trend has tried to continue on here. Now, I think really on the weekly time frame, one of two things is probably going on. All right. Now, obviously one of two things can happen. Either we can go low or we can go high, right? Well, I like to think of it maybe in a slightly different way, in the idea and concepts of what is the market going to do next, all right? So if the trend is going to continue down, we could see this area of demand down here turn into an area of supply, okay? Now, in order for that area to turn into an area of supply, I think what would be appropriate is maybe a little bounce around in here, kind of like what it seems to be doing, and then it makes a new low. Making a new low is very important for this area to flip-flop. Now, what I see here in the price action is the start of something like that happening here. But we only want to see it flip-flop, and in the bigger term perspective, or in the smaller term perspective, you know, we can be looking at this as a leg down, a retracement back up here, and a leg back down. Okay. However, here and now, we have to realize that what if this doesn't happen, right? What if for some reason it pops back up? It says, hey, this is the lowest that I want to go, and I'm not going to do that. So we need to define when has the reversal actually happened off of this low here. Okay, so when has price said, hey, I've gone down low enough and I'm not going to go any lower, and price action fails to make a new low? Well, if you're in the AppZones community, you probably know how we determine that already. But that is what I'm looking for right here. Is I'm really looking for like the zone to flip-flop from demand to supply, but only time will tell. Okay, so until that flip-flop and until price action fails to do something, I'm going to say that trend follow is to the downside and counter trend is to the long side. So CT for short, TF for trend follow. It's just a couple little abbreviations that I like to do. Okay. So that's kind of how I see things here. Does that make sense to everybody? I sure hope so. So that's what I see happening on the bigger time frame, and I thought I would take a moment to share that with everybody in attendance or everybody watching this video. Now, what does that look like on here? Okay, this is our daily context chart. All right, so these are all the levels in our weekly levels. We're seeing the fractal confluence of the zones as they are playing out before us. All right, so what does that look like here for us right now? All right, well, the context of the daily chart is saying that we've obviously been in a downtrend as the trend has been painting the background red, but it has now flattened out. Okay, so during this little retracement period, it has completely flattened out the trender. So the trender has been flat for, let's say, about a month or so, you know? And I find that interesting just because when the trender goes flat, we could really be going into two different things, which really kind of supports the weekly perspective that we had. But as the trender goes flat, we can be looking for a range. All right. So this market could be ranging, and that represents by that trender being flat. We've not seen a new low, right? So we could expect to see a range type of thing happen here, or we could see a little pullback, a little retracement, so to speak, and then the continuation to the downside. All right. So on the weekly time frame, obviously we've had the pullback. Now we're having the retest of the overall lower low. Okay. So this is kind of a major turning point area. All right. So on the daily time frame, I want to highlight this level here as a possible way to join the trend to the downside. Okay. So if I highlight that level here, I can go down to my 60-minute time frame, and I can say, hey, what has happened here on my 60-minute or on my entry chart that would allow me to sell high and buy back low? All right, so I'm basically working my way through the fractal as it happens. That's what I'm trying to show, trying to do. Now, we can do all of this stuff on one chart with the advanced packages of Apizones, but we want to do this manually right now, just so that everybody can hopefully follow along. All right, so inside this level, we can see prices bounce off of, inside this big daily level, I should say, we can see prices been bouncing off of a couple different levels, right? We have the purple level that coincides with the top part of the daily zone, and we've had another purple level form that's just a little bit below. All right, so we can see the retest of this level, and then price seems to be breaking down, failing to go higher, and coming back down here to this area of support. Okay, so that's what I see happening here. And I hope that makes sense as to how it's all working out, and that excuse me, and that it's very apparent to see, like, hey, price actions failed to break high, so let's go retest support. Resistance is holding, support could be doing something new. All right, so that's the ideas behind this, and we will see how this matures through the following week. Okay. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask, or any comments on anything. Just be working our way through the different charts here. It looks like I did have a question about when would I execute a CT trade. Basically on a retest of like that weekly level, I'd be waiting for something we refer to as the price action failure. So that's when I would look to execute there. In a very simplistic answer. Might be a little too simplistic there, but if you're familiar with price action and what we teach in the Apizones community, then I'm sure you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so here on the euro pound, let's just go ahead and look at the current levels. I'm just going to go to our context chart here. All right, so we've been looking at a trend follow play to the downside here. And it looks like we didn't update our chart last week, but that is okay. So on this particular play, or on this particular instrument, I should say, we still have the trender coming down. It's still red. The background is still painted red. And we've gotten a little bit bigger retracement. It looks like we're watching these two levels, so nothing major happened on the daily chart to give us or signal that short. Okay. Now something's happening here off of this aqua zone, and right where price is meeting the trender. All right. So I think that's very interesting. And what this signifies in price action terms is a lower high. Okay. So I think that is interesting as well. I still like the idea of the trend follow to the downside. I will be watching this aqua zone here. But something very interesting is happening on this market as far as, you know, like this could be a pretty good push down, or we could find support right in there. All right. So it's not as good as when it was hitting the weekly level and the daily zone, but now we formed a new daily zone, kind of forming off of that weekly bounce that we had, and we're coming down even further here. So I would say that the trend follow is to the downside still. Counter trend, it's kind of an interesting idea, but I would really want to see this weekly level get taken out before I look to go long. And then I'd want to wait for the retest of such to have, just for this thing to retest in here and then take it. So we're going to say that CT is up there. Okay. Now you could also take a CT counter trend trade down here at the bottom, as if you were like trying to play like the weekly zones or something like that. You know, you could take a counter trend from the bottom here too. Again, I would be waiting for a price action failure to happen. So just so that's kind of clear. But we could also draw a CT trade to the upside right there. All right. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. All right. So let's move over to the euro yen. And as we look at that market, this is pretty cool here. We have identified a trend follow trade to the upside, really hinging off of the encounter and the failure of price to do something down below here. So if you've been following with us, we've actually seen this thing pop out very nicely to the upside. So this really isn't that big of a surprise to us. It was something that we were looking at a couple weeks ago, and it's just come to fruition here. So trend follow to the long, counter trend would be to the short. I'm really not expecting to see too much weekly supply come into place until we're hitting up here at the top of the range, so to speak, or the higher highs up here, where those aqua zones are. So yes, we did find some resistance here on the daily time frame, and we can kind of see price respecting that level. However, it hasn't taken out that green bar since touching the daily zone, so I think that is of interest there. I would say that there's no reason to think that the trend is to the downside. So I'm just going to keep the TF right where it is, and a counter trend play would be that short type of play here. Okay. Now, could this retracement be all the way down here, or maybe somewhere where this weekly level was? Sure, it could. You know, we could see maybe something flip-flopping right around in here. I don't know if it will or not. You know, the market can do anything that it wants to. But I would definitely define any type of short position as a CT or counter trend on this particular market. All right, so let's mosey on over to the dollar yen. And this is what we have here. On the dollar yen, I'm just going to go to our daily context chart. right off the bat. I happen to see a TF and a CT forming here, so it looks like the trend is still in this direction here. Okay, we have gotten a pullback, right? So I'm going to be looking at the aqua zone just to see how deep this pullback is going to go. But looks like that analysis that we had a few weeks ago is still in play. I'm just going to move everything over to the right here. And say if you're playing it off the top, then you're doing a counter trend play there. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everyone. But this has been really cool to see this thing pop through there. We've gotten a little bit of a retracement now, so I still think the trend follow is to the upside here. All right, let's go over here and take a look at crude. Now, on the weekly, we have found really a good amount of supply from the 59 up to the 63 level that was formed in December as the crude market splashed down. And actually, maybe it wasn't quite. Yeah, it was in the middle of December when this level was formed. So, 5 months, 6 months down the road, we can see this level is now in play, which is pretty cool how that works. So on the daily, this is what we have identified. And been looking for trend follows to the long side. All right, so our trend is completely flat right now, which means we are in a range, folks. Okay, now we've gotten stuck in this range. All right, so we could wait for the breakout, and that's not a bad idea to wait for the breakout of this trend just to see what happens here. All right. I do like that idea a lot. I'm going to be looking at some trend lines here as well. I would say prices kind of beat those, and sorry for the extra drawings. I do day trade this market, so you'll see some extra drawings on the chart here. It's just the stuff that I'm looking at on the intraday bars. Something that really catches my eye is this consolidation over here on the left. We've slightly ticked below it. We bounced off of it once. Now we're retesting the high again. More times the level gets retested, the weaker and weaker it gets. So I'm not really married to either or right now at this time. I think I'm going to flip this around though and follow the trend from the weekly. Because we're in a range, I think it's important to treat it like a range. So I'm looking for the extremes of the level to really be taking trades from on a swing trade perspective. And in a day trade perspective, it really can change quite a bit there. Okay. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. And we will see how this continues to play out here. But time will tell, as they say. Looks like we're getting quite a few gappy movements in this too, so there's a lot of after hours trading in this market. It's getting pretty wicky and pretty gappy as well. So really interesting level overall. But we know why it's interesting because, it's a supply level, you know. Let's go ahead and take a look at the indexes, at the ES here. So again, if you guys have any comments or questions, or anybody in the live audience would like to throw anything out there, please feel free to do so. On the ES, it looks like we're still in our uptrend. However, again, it is a very rangy uptrend. So I think that is interesting to say the least. Very, very rangy. You can tell that a lot of people are very uncertain just by how rangy this thing has been for the last 6 months. It's in December, something started happening as far as the drop goes, and then it's just gotten in this like very big range, but it is a slow uptrend. All right. So now I'm gonna do something that I normally don't do, but I remember something kind of like this happening back like maybe 5 years ago, maybe 6. Yeah, there we go. This was happening here in the E-mini. Got a pretty big rangy bars going back and forth here. Nice little like, well, I guess it wasn't quite a double bottom, but it didn't make a new low slightly, and then it came back up, and ever since that October, it's been in this uptrend. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know why this current price action reminded me of this, but it did. So we've only had very small pullbacks since that time. There was one kind of big over here in October. But right now I would say it's getting a whole lot more consolidated than what we saw back there in 2011. So just an interesting observation. I still would play this as a overall trend, even though it's extremely rangy, you know. Overall trend is to the upside, just like what the trender is showing us here. So looking to buy the pullbacks to the upside. Buy low, sell high. We really want to keep it that simple. All right, let's look at a couple ETFs here. XLE looks like it's in a range from the weekly perspective. So if we're in the range, again, we want to be buyers or sellers on the top or the bottom of the range, and we want to wait until it's at those points before we engage in something. But if it is, coming down here, then, we still have some space to the downside before it's at the bottom of the range. So we want to be aware of that. The trender is flat here on the daily time frame. Again, re-emphasizing the idea of the range. So we're identifying the range from the big weekly levels, and I think that these big weekly levels really sum it up quite well, you know. So again, it looks like a bunch of these markets are in the range. All right, so let's go look at this. This is another ETF, XLF. On the XLF, this one actually has just made a new high. So that is different than what we've been seeing for the most part. I think we've only seen a couple markets today where the trend is to the upside, and buyers are rejoicing. The trend here on the daily time frame is pretty flat still, so I'd hope to see that thing go ahead and get a little bit of a curve to it again. So we've been coming out of a range, and looks like we're going up. All right, so let's go take a look at ZB here. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna come back over to this one, and I'm just gonna label it out just for everybody. I now that we've made a new high, I would be looking to wait for a pullback, you know, and then take it even higher. That would be a cool idea there, I think. All right, so we're gonna say trend follow to the long. Counter trend to the short. Now, realistically, I would be waiting until at least after these lows right here, maybe even a little bit lower for a counter trend play. And, you know, it does have to move in waves, or the market does move in waves, I should say. It doesn't have to do anything, but we usually see a lot of wave motion, so maybe we'll get a new low, wait for the pullback, and then take it in a new trend direction, so to speak. So that's kind of the idea that I'm looking for there. Let's go over to ZB here. And it looks like we're pretty flat on the daily. On the weekly, we have just touched a weekly zone. So that is indeed very cool. Let's kind of look at this overall. So this looks like a pretty major pullback. If you take it as a pullback to the long side, I'm almost positive that we've seen this market, if we turn on the dead zones here, show dead zones, yeah, there it is. We had this dead zone right here, so it has pushed through a couple different levels for us, and obviously we failed to break higher, so now it's coming down low. All right. Now the question that we have to ask ourselves, is this a pullback, or is this a major trend directional change type of thing going on here? So that's what we're looking at here on the big weekly time frame. All right, now this level we know has already been retested once just because of the zone color. All right, so we know that for sure. So the more times that price retests this level, the weaker and weaker it gets. All right. Now, personally, being the developer of the software, I just happen to know that we're going to get a level popping up here. All right. So here in another bar or two, we should see something going right in there. Now, what does that represent to me? Well, that represents like kind of a flip-flop of support and resistance, or actually in this case, supply and demand. All right. So I'm not going to draw it in until it actually appears, but that's what I'm thinking. And I don't mind seeing a pop back up here and then a move back down if the trend is going to be to the downside. All right. But the real thing that we have to ask ourselves is the trend up or down on the weekly time frame. So in consideration of that idea, I already have a thought, all right, and that is the trend is down, so we're going to write in our little TF and CT ideas here. All right. But I'm going to be waiting for the TF trade to line up from some level up here, and I'm going to be waiting for the CT trade. Well, it's basically doing the CT trade right now if it bounces up, okay? Now, technically, I should probably take a little bit more time here, and I'm going to do it just because this one's a little tricky. And I have a wonderful checklist that I can use to help me define trend just to make sure that I'm doing it very systematically. So I'm going to do that here on the daily time frame. I'm going to turn on my zones. And I'm just going to run through this real quick. Yeah. So I'm going to come in here and say that the trend is down, and I'm just looking for the pullback. Okay. All right, so that's what I'm going to be looking for here. I really like this level up there, but so something like this for the trend follow. And counter trend would be basically happening now. Or I wouldn't even say now, I would say it already happened. So that's kind of how I see that going down here. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. Looks like I did it pretty much the same way on both of these charts, so I'm going to go ahead and erase the one on the weekly. And that's what I'm looking at here. So on the smaller time frame, considering a couple of different things, now personally right now I wouldn't be looking for an entry. And that's just me, okay? You could do the counter trend entry, if anything, but just be aware that this is a counter trend entry and where you would be looking to take your targets being pulled off of our context chart. Okay, so for instance, if you're doing the counter trend, which would be the long, okay, then we could be buyers down here in this level. I don't want to be a blind buyer just buying this level just because it's a level right there. I want to wait and let price confirm this level for me. All right. So I think that's important in the grand scheme here, is to wait and let this level confirm itself. All right. And then we take it up. And this would be a counter trend play if you're swing trading this market. This would be counter trend. And you're basically looking to play it up to the highs, or at least up to this level here on our daily charts. Okay. So again, confirmation after your analysis is done, wait for confirmation so that we can ride the bus or ride the train and not stand in front of the train. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like standing in front of trains. So if you want to stand in front of a train, I won't be anywhere close to you. Let's just put it that way. So anyway, that's how I kind of look at the levels, and I hope that helps. Again, it's really good to always have checklists, just in case you ever find a situation like, where is the trend at? Run your checklist, make sure that everything's lining up, kind of as you saw me do, and uh, jump jump onto the train. Don't try to jump in front of the train. So hope that helps, guys. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask or send us a message, an email message. You can contact us through email or through Twitter and on the website, forums, all kinds of ways to contact us. We've hoped you've enjoyed today's session and our outlook on all the different indexes and markets and pairs out there. So please feel free to drop us a line or to take a look at our website, apazones.com. We also have Skype too. And I'm going to go ahead and be stopping the recording for this week, but hope to see you next week. So take care, everybody, and God bless. Bye-bye now.